about the noise, where legends rise. From the clouds to the crowd, this is Ckrowd, where Africa meets opportunity, where music meets magic.
Hello guys, welcome to another edition of our L&D series, and today we will be talking about rethinking Africa's music exports in a borderless world. We are excited to have our lead here at Ckrowd Africa. By the way, I go by the name Elias Ayodele, and we have KBayo in our midst. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you, Elias, and thank you for great things that you guys are doing and the passion you guys put behind educating music industry professionals on the African continent. So I'm glad to be here, and I'm hoping that we have a fantastic time, discussing about these topics that I think I'm quite passionate about.
So first things first, before we delve into the questions that I have here, I'm looking at the word Africa. I'm looking at Africa's music. I'm looking at Africa's music exports. And now I'm looking at the borderless world. I don't know if you care to give us a backstory to Africa, then Africa's music, then Africa's music export. Then we talk about the borderless world in general, sir.
Africa, for me, I believe that's where civilization started from. And because civilization started from Africa, to a very large extent, I think anything that had to do with culture also started from where civilization started from. Music, sound, and the culture behind music in itself. And I don't think, if anybody will tell you the truth also, they will tell you that whatever music right now that is out there on the global level, especially from the American culture that we believe it's the more advanced economically, they will tell you that most of the history of their music has very deep roots in Black music, and then also have very deep roots. The Black music now have very deep roots in Africa also, because this music was, it was exported by most of the slaves that probably at that time, I'm not saying they didn't have any kind of music then, but the reality of it is that what has become popular music that everybody somehow keys into, enjoys, and somehow is distributed globally, has a lot of roots from Black music, and that Black music came from Africa. And right now, somehow, I think we are experiencing a very fantastic renaissance now, where there is nearly a full circle now, where the music is going back to Africa again, with a view that Africans are the one making the music. But that is more from a content perspective. Then when we talk about a borderless world, I think the world gradually is becoming flat. And when I mean flat, it means that it has become more like a village. I am here right now. Most of the phone calls and most of the conversations I have on a weekly, daily basis are conversations with colleagues in South Africa, with colleagues in the US, colleagues in Australia, colleagues in other African countries. And Africa is a 54 country continent, 1.5 billion people. So you can imagine the volume of cultures that is here. And I don't think Africa can have anything less than 5,000 to 7,000 tribes. And you can imagine one tribe alone, the depth of culture that tribe alone will have, from music, fashion, to food, to all those things. So the world is flat now. As I said, it's borderless. So to a large extent, I'm here. There can't be any border between how I make a conversation with a guy in UK. There won't be any, any kind of border beyond me having a conversation with someone in Namibia. So far, there's internet connection. So far, there's a mobile and smartphone available. That communication will always happen. And when that happens, it means that there's a lot of commerce that can happen between those two situations. I want to move some form of payment to somebody in Lesotho. I can do that all through my phone without necessarily even having to get to the bank. So far, he has infrastructure there, and I have infrastructure here. We kind of connect together to be able to deliver whatever value we want to kind of share with each other. So that would be my perspective, to the question you asked.
All right. I think that's really encompassing enough. I mean, now we can see that different cultures are coming together, in fact, continents now. I mean, if Africa is now the center, it means people from outside Africa want to also interact with Africa in the grand scheme of things. So, yes, I think that is really an encompassing way to explain this topic. Sir, thank you so much for that. For someone that has been following you for a while now, I have realized that you've often used the word creative economy. And I think it's an area that you really have interest in. So beyond the buzzword, how do you define Africa's music economy today? I mean, what are the key infrastructures that are missing? And to make the African music economy, globally competitive, what are the things that you want to suggest and, point out, sir?
Okay, so I think number one, I don't think Africa is lacking in any form of when you look at it from a content perspective, right?
Okay.
Our music not queued up with any other kind of music like what is out there in the world. You can imagine the number and the volume of music that comes out of Africa. But let's even talk about the most popular ones, right? We're talking Afro beats, the fella Afro beats. We are talking about Afro beats, the one that is more like the pop culture Afro beats. We see what is happening with house music from South Africa. We see what is happening with Amapiano. We see what is happening from Suku's music, and quite a lot of these types of music, right? Unfortunately for us, again, Africa is divided into like 4 regions. We have the Lusophone Africa, which is those that speak Portuguese. We have the Anglophone Africa, the English-speaking Africa, Francophone Africa, and then I call it the Arabia Africa. That is the more of the Northern Africa, where they have a lot of very strong similarities with Arabian cultures and all that. So when we talk about content, Africa is not lacking in that content, in what we call content, and that would be, for me, I'll define that as a product in itself. So product itself, raw materials, is not an issue. Then Africa has quite a heavy population. We have a 1.5 billion people market, and when you look at somewhere like Nigeria is a population-wise, we are the biggest, 200 million, and of course by 2050, it's already talking about how it will fast move beyond 300 and something million. So is a thing, music as a product. And it's a thing for that product to be able to be properly shelved. When I mean shelves, now I can put shelves like as if you go to a shop, right? And it's one thing for the music to be able to be distributed in the way where information about the music is out there, to want to come and partake in the music and shop it like a product, just to be able to have that experience of having music, right? And enjoying. There's no how human beings can live without sound and some form of organized sound, support their daily experiences, right? And then beyond that, we are now looking at how do we package music in a way where it becomes an experience for people to use as time people's lives. How do you put all that together for people to experience it, to become soundtrack of their lives and all that, right? So that whole process it's like a whole value and supply chain, which needs to be, people need to be very deliberate about it, whether it is government, whether it's a private sector. You have to see music as a product with a view that it will be produced. When it's produced, it will have to be an idea first. You produce it. When you produce it, then you probably want to position it. Then you position it, you distribute it for it to get far and wide. People purchase it. There's an economic exchange for that music experience. And then, of course, how it can now be shared and curated as experiences for people. So Africa is not exactly as end-to-end in all these things I've just mentioned, which is like the economic journey of music material, right? Africa, when you look at Africa right now, I think Africa is more leaning in the direction of the idea of the music and then the production of the music. But by the time you start to think around distribution of the music, the returns, and then you want to talk about the experiences and all that, then that becomes an issue. But what we have done over a while now, which I think we can improve on, is that Africa has become an incubation market for the talent and the sound. So we incubate it here, the sound forms here, the idea of that sound, that product, the continent. Then somehow we give it an early level engagement by the local market gravitating towards it and enjoying it and using it to build different experiences for themselves. But when it now comes to the aspect of scaling it into something that can now become huge economic benefits to those that created it and were part of that whole process, Africa is still lacking in that. That there's a strong potential for it to scale out of the continent. And eventually, those continents or those markets that already have the end-to-end value chain properly put in place are the ones that capture that value and eventually find economic expression for it. So you find out that your music that you make in Lagos is probably making an executive in Sweden very rich. And how has that affected the local market here that created that music and incubated it? You'll find out that most likely it might just only be the artist and maybe a very build around the artist that enjoy the economic benefits of it, instead of it being something that has economic impact across board. Because imagine if in Nigeria here, the platforms that the music is being distributed on, imagine if we owned the arenas that the music can be performed in. Imagine if one way or the other, we own the cloud infrastructure that holds the database of the music, and how we now have opportunities to curate experiences around the venues, theme parks, and build a lot of value that extend out of that music. Imagine the volume of people that he can put food on their table and guarantee their future.
All right, sir. You mentioned something really caught my attention. So, for instance, you talked about the African music becoming a global product. I mean, the artist cannot be the same person that will market his tracks. It's not the same person that will book venues and do all of these things. That brings us to the part of the professionals exactly that do the work for the artist. And I mean, now we know that, look at most of our successful artists, we see that there is no particular formula. I mean, we have Rema shutting down the O2. We have Wizkid, Davido, Burna. I mean, talking about their stylists and things like that. We see them using foreign guys because it feels like, to an extent, we don't really have that here in Africa. And then we are just trying to like hire these guys. So looking at this, I'm looking at can, bridge this gap and have more African professionals doing this thing. How do platforms like Ckrowd, seek to do this? How do we bring Africans into the professional part of it, in helping and ensuring that the artists can attain global success?
Okay, yeah. So when people say music is going global, African music is going global, African music has always been global to a large extent, right? But the globalness, if a word like that supported globalization then, it was a combination of local African practitioners working together with international practitioners, maybe under a global enterprise, to now kind of cross carpet that music and experience from the local market into international, and then from the international into local also. Because, we have a history of the Beatles coming to Africa, right, to enter into studios with Fela to do recordings and coming to get inspiration for their whole album here. They worked with some people on here. So it meant that there was a lot of fluidness in how people moved around to kind of capture. I remember that in the Beatles' journey also, there were times when they went to India also. And, so it has always been like that. But I think there were a lot of fragmentation that happened maybe around the 90s or the late 80s when government political situations started to happen. And typically business will move towards where there's a little bit more peace. So somehow that connection between the international broke, and that void was left there for quite a while. Now it is coming back. There is a need to a gradual process where the international and the local practitioners are trying to come back together again to form that easy access across markets, right? So one of the first things that has to happen is, number one, there needs to be an elevation of information perspective. The local guys here, it is not just enough for them to stay local and then to operate locally, because they won't get full value for that skill level that they have. So there's a need. When I talk to people at the global level and we are trying to talk about business and bringing Africa into that particular conversation, the fear, you see a bit of fear in the faces of those international guys saying, if I work with Africans on this, how am I sure that they have the level of professionalism that can allow this thing to work properly without it collapsing? That was what got us thinking that, okay, so the necessity around working with Africans is not the issue. There's a need, there's a desire to want to work with Africans because they don't even have a choice right now, because biologically there's a lot of advantages that needs them to be on the African continent. And so the fear is, are they professional enough? So for us, it now became like, okay, so if we came to the local market here and found ways to be able to upgrade their knowledge, upgrade their understanding of the industry and how it works, to get them to a level where they are global, they have a global talent level. Their skill level is good as the guy in Sweden, and as good as the guy in the UK, as good as the guy in Australia. Then there wouldn't be any concern about working together. It makes more money flow into the continent and more value flow out of the continent, and shared values and shared revenue can occur. So that was why we started this whole thing called Ckrowd. That, okay, can we work with those guys at our international space trying to expand into African market and maybe developing markets like Africa and Latin America, and saw that level of fear that they have, which is getting Africans to be upskilled to a level where they can play their capacity at a global level. And I can tell you that Africans even have more advantage, especially the professionals. When you are talking to a graphic designer now, in Africa. When you put a graphic designer in the UK together with a guy in Nigeria here, I'm not saying the Nigerian here will flood the UK guy totally, but there are elements in that design that he can provide that the UK guy doesn't even have a clue about. For example, the capacity of brown, the volume of browns that the local Nigerian has seen compared to the one the guy in the UK has seen is varied. Because this dude here has lived across a road that hasn't been tarred in ages. He has seen clay brown, he has seen sand brown, he has seen so many things, and those things reflect. Then, of course, when you look at someone like a producer, imagine the kind of sounds that the Nigerian producer or the African producer have listened and heard in his life. Is raw and nearly divine compared to the guy that lives in a structured environment where every sound is nearly curated for something. So there's a lot of value there. Locally, what we just need to do is upskill our professionals to a level where they can play at the global level, and it has to be done at scale, so that by the time the guys at the international level are looking at working and delivering projects on the African continent and maybe even expanding their businesses to Africa, and African music expanding as globally as you have been mentioning, there is a human resource, there is a workforce available to aid and support that level of scale. And that's what we are trying to do here in Ckrowd, where we kind of upskill the professionals and then give comfort to the internationals to come and find the right professionals to be able to work with in order to get their projects done on the African continent.
All right, sir. Thank you so much. I think you answered to an extent that, okay, there are some barriers that limit us, and that's because we've not particularly upskilled. So is there a way we can, overcome this? Are there particular things that we can put in place, like maybe like a resource hub, or like Ckrowd brings these guys together? I think you'd want to talk about that, sir.
Okay, number one, the music industry is a $35 billion industry that is going to move very fast towards the 40-50 billion mark, maybe in the next, like 5 years. The huge industry. That's recording music industry. Then let's go to the live music industry. The live music industry is huge also. $1 billion, far bigger than the recording music industry, right? Then we now have things like the gaming industry. The gaming industry that, like chips, right? Because in your gaming experience, you have to have music underlay into that experience in order to kind of build an emotion around all the activities that you are playing, that you are having on that game, right? All these industries consume music, and these are $300 billion dollar industries and all that. I know people that are music artists that don't create music for recording and distribution. They create it directly to serve gaming industry. I know artists that create music and direct their music to be used only in advertising industry and for TV and films. And imagine the film industry, another $100 billion. So the industry is huge. The fact that we have not gotten our share strongly in that industry is because, number one, the workforce is not exactly as ready. When the workforce becomes as ready, you start to see capital flow in that direction. Then somehow Africa has not played at a particular time. When you look at things like popular music and all that, African music has always been seen as some form of, I won't use the word obscure, but I'll use the word, when they say someone is exotic, a kind of exotic style of music, right? It's not popular music, it's just a niche kind of music, right? But two things are happening right now that are making things change very fast. Number one, Africa will become the youngest continent in the next 5 to 10 years, where 40% of the 1.5 billion people that we just mentioned now, 40 to 60% of them will be young people that will be under the ages of, let's say, 35 and below. That is the prime music listening and consuming age. So when you now have 800 million people thereabout with smartphones, with affordable internet, that are trying to consume music as content and other forms of visual content also, which needs to be layered with, then you now see that from a customer perspective, right? Africa becomes the biggest consumer, one of the biggest consumers of music in the entire world in the next 5 years. So meaning that your business is not existing in Africa, or you are not doing African business in your music business in the next 5 to 10 years, you most likely might not be able to survive. And that means that if people need to hear music that has some level of expression like Africa, you can't bring a Swedish guy to come and do that. It will need to be an African guy that you need to upskill to be able to give you that particular kind of service. Of course, plugging it into a national market structure, but African people will need to be the one culturally curating experiences around music, creating and producing music in order. You can tell what will happen in the next 10 years if you know what is happening today already. Today already, Africans are not consuming Drake. Drake top level music brand that they consume. Taylor Swift is not. For them, on an African continent, you are talking Rema. You understand? You are talking Rema, you are talking Ayasta, you are talking Ashake, you are talking Caspar Neovest, and you are talking Musa Keys, and you are talking about all these people, right? So it means that when you look at the volume of business that Africa will bring into the global market in the next 5 to 10 years, there's a very strong possibility that African music stars will become the Billboard stars of the next 5 to 10 years. So it will, for anybody that is doing the music business, to start to look at the possibility of getting Africans to be part of your global team in order for them to be the one supporting that expansion process for those enterprises that are trying to enter into Africa to be part of that whole movement. So naturally, there will be demand for African talents, professional talents, more demand for producers, more demand from office assistants, and from music accountants, PR people, graphic designers, social media marketers, playlist curators. So the demand for African talents and professionals will become far bigger. We're already experiencing it now. That's why we have Ckrowd existing as a company that somehow doesn't really need investors to operate now. We are driving our business purely based on the demand of what our services, people in all these international companies need from us. Not that we are looking and running around for investors. It is that demand that is delivering that. And I can assure you that it's going to spiral beyond anything anybody expects now, because everybody is talking about the music now. Everybody is so concentrated on Africa to the globe or to the world right now. They are not thinking about it will expand in the next 5 to 10 years. Then who are the ones that will cater to that expansion? You can't scale up your production on anything in any business without needing staffs. So that's where Ckrowd comes in, providing and delivering the workforce that will support the expansion of African music to the globe, or expansion of international music into Africa in the next, even starting from now. So that's the whole idea. There's a need to upskill to be able to be at that global talent level, so that when these guys are coming in, they won't have any issues as to talent deficit. And that's why we are building technology to support that process, where our Ckrowd.com becomes the directory for human resource, early level professionals, middle level professionals, and top level professionals. So that when these guys are coming and trying to prospect talents, they don't have to get into a dark black market. They go to Ckrowd, and Ckrowd already fine-tuned all those situations for them. And they see talent, they pick talent, they pay for talent. And then the guy in Africa here doesn't need to escape Africa or need to japa before he has good work.
All right. So you also mentioned that now African music businesses should start to think like tech startups rather than traditional entertainment enterprises and companies. So I feel this is where Ckrowd Africa comes in. This is where we onboard people and train them to see how to begin to think like professionals that they are. So I don't know if you want to give us actionable steps that mid-level African music professionals, say for instance, media strategy managers or mixing engineers, can take today future-proof their careers. So what steps can they take to increase global demand for their skill sets?
Well, I think school generally, I think school in this whole thing that we know school for, right, which is the four walls of a particular citadel or of education, is going to have a lot of challenges going forward, right? Because we have gotten to a time in civilization now that your skill level, what you have, what you can sit down and do, is far more important than the years in which you spent in doing a lot of theoretical stuff. So I'm seeing a lot of alternative schools spring up generally, which something, look at it from a tech perspective, right? You had companies that are alternative training schools, right, that came in and supported the process where you are able to come in as nearly someone that just has interest into becoming someone that has a skill, maybe in less than 3 years, less than even 2 years. And those skills eventually become important in your earning process. So it means that if I start a process today and I give myself, let's say, 18 to 24 months, I can eventually turn into somebody that can start to earn, maybe, for example, between a $500 to $1,000 monthly, because I have upskilled myself to be part of a global ecosystem in that particular industry. And now I can sell myself as, oh, I can deliver affordable services to you than that guy that probably is giving you that same service in maybe Georgia. And because of that, I become an earner. Fantastic thing that, well, I don't know, a lot of people don't like it, but for me, I believe that one of the best things from a business and enterprise perspective that has happened to Nigeria is the fact that somehow our dollar to naira rate has crashed. So what that has done is that it has made a lot of things from a Nigerian perspective a lot more affordable to be sold into an international market that is willing to pay a particular figure for it. That is a discount for them compared to how much they pay for that situation out there internationally. So, for example, if probably somebody was charging, if an instrumentalist like a bassist is being charges maybe like $5,000, $4,000 to be in a session, or $5,000 to be in a session towards creating an album. With technology now, I can reach out to Nigeria, find a bassist that has such level of capacity and the other level of dexterity, tell him to get into the studio, give him the framework of what he's supposed to do, and eventually he can do it, put it on WeTransfer or any of these file transfer platforms, and get it to you in LA. And most likely you pay $1,000 for that service, or you pay $500 for that service, compared to that guy that is charging you $4,000 for just one session. I don't know if you understand, if you see the dynamics.
Yes.
So that's the dynamics that is there right now. So for us at Ckrowd, what we are doing is looking at all, we service everybody that is in the music industry ecosystem, except the music artist that's on stage delivering performance. Because for us, what is most important to us is to have a fantastically healthy ecosystem. Because if we have a very fantastic ecosystem that clearly understands the business, that clearly understands the value, the chain of value and the chain of how music is created and supplied, and everybody is well informed about the music industry, of how it plays out locally and internationally, it means that we'll have far more fantastic music artists that will come out of that ecosystem. We'll have more knowledgeable music artists, we'll have more talented music artists, because the people that judge value, that judge talent, are more experienced. They know what to look out for, and less trial and error is happening. So I think that's what we are trying to do here in Ckrowd, where we are focused more around the music industry professionals, them getting the level of alternative training. For example, we are creating a library of content on YouTube for free, where we are talking with the best minds in the music industry, different disciplines. Before now, the way music industry capacity building was done is like, it was nearly like a size fits all. Oh, we want to train music industry people. They bring them into one hall. They just tell them the same thing. But we are doing a lot more we are doing it more in a more fragmented way. We are telling the DJs what he needs to know. We are telling the producer what he needs to know. We are telling the office admin person what he needs to know. We are telling the accountant what he needs to know. We are telling the lawyer what the lawyer needs to know. And we are bringing experts from all these industries together to come and be part of supporting the capacity building for the industry. And I believe that that is the best approach. Very soon we are going into competitions, more like training competitions, where we'll have some money at stake, and then we'll have industry people go through a particular process, do some assessment, and eventually maybe write kind of like a small exam, all done digitally by Ckrowd, where we can eventually have top professionals emerge on the other side. They win money, and then we're able to profile them also as the top people in their different fields for the different time in which they have entered into the industry. And I think that gives the international enterprise a lot more comfort to be able to work with them, because they know that these are the best minds that are in the industry. So for us, and then of course we start to look at the future of work and the future of hiring. What are the things that will happen in the next 5 years that even us right now have not started thinking about yet in skill acquisition that will be needed? For example, cross-border businesses. How do we tell people about it and inform and train people to have the capacity to do cross-border businesses in the music industry in Africa? How can we train people in that whole space of tech music and tech integration, where there's a lot more technology involved. Technology and music, how does it interact and integrate together? How can we train more people in that area? Then how can we start to think about, talk to people around new business? How do you break new markets? And you having the qualification and the training for that. So that the guy that is coming from Spain, I was on the call with somebody yesterday that was in California, and the person was having so much grandiose ideas about how to do business in Africa. But I told him, I said, that's not how it will work in Africa. It can't work that way because you don't know much about Africa. If you want to know about Africa, you come and talk to people that know how it works in Africa, and then you get the necessary soft landing. And of course, you can't just have that without paying for it. So things around market intelligence, business intelligence, and cultural intelligence are the things that we provide to enterprises that work with Ckrowd to give them a far stronger advantage in landing in Africa and doing business in a way where they get fantastic return on their investment.
All right, sir. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a very insightful session. Today, we've been able to see that the African music is now a global thing, as we have always known. But this time around, there is a need to structure it and specialize it. And this explains why we are at Ckrowd Africa, we are trying to bring in professionals. We're trying to train them so that they can meet up with the global standard. And in fact, offer these services in a way that the financial, burden is reasonable to the foreign investor. It's a win-win for everybody at the end of the day. And with this kind of structure that we have in place, Africa's music exports will stand in the borderless world that we have today. It has been amazing having you on this call, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think one of the last things I just probably want to say is the fact that Africa is going to become the biggest consumer of music in the next 5 to 10 years. Money will always flow in the direction of where the customers are. More money, and then that money will go into service different processes that will capture that value for those that are investing in it. So if there's any time that African professionals, music industry professionals should relish, it is this time. It is more about positioning now. How do you position to become the best producer? How do you position to become the best music industry lawyer? How do you position to become the best licensed, legal professional? How do you, become the best business developer and have cross-cultural understanding of how to move between the different markets of Africa? So I'm very excited at what is coming, and I'm hoping that everybody listening to this also would eventually put in the right work towards being able to position themselves so that when that dollar starts to flow in, everybody to a large extent is able to be part of a more global industry, and of course being able to enjoy the reward that comes from their years of having themselves and position themselves basically. So it's nice. I really appreciate you having me, and it was quite some insightful questions you asked, and I'm hoping that somehow a lot of people learned from it.
All right, thank you so much, sir. So this is a side note to people that see this video. If you have questions, you want to reach us at Ckrowd Africa to get info and inquiries, you can text through YouTube here, Ckrowd Africa. You find us on all social media platforms: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok. So we'll send in more details in the description as well, so you can find us. Thank you so much. Do have a nice day.